afternoon, everyone. This is Joanne Stevens with Iva Realty Commercial, and this is our Thursday call-in show. We have a very special guest that I will be introducing in a few moments. And today, my interview is with Amy Bliss, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Housing Alliance. And we're going to learn some great things that Amy is spearheading in Wisconsin, and it's some good stuff that any community owner is going to want to be aware of. So we'll have some good food for thought. Before I introduce Amy Bliss, I want to make a few announcements, and I want to remind people that the Manufactured Housing Institute first meeting of 2018 will be February 4th, 5th, and 6th in New Orleans at the Ritz. And MHI always does a great job at their meetings. There's 3 meetings a year plus the Las Vegas Congress, which the Las Vegas Congress is April 24th, 25th, and 26th. This year, the event is at the Paris Hotel, and it is the place to come and learn about what is happening in the industry, and also meet people who are experts and get some fresh ideas and learn things that are going to help you sell homes, operate your properties. It's an excellent event to learn some fresh ideas or to freshen up on things you've been doing to be successful. Also, I want to remind people of the Louisville event, which is the manufacturers exhibition in Louisville, Kentucky, this January 17th, 18th, and 19th. You can go to my website, joannemstevens.com, and in the upper right-hand corner, you can click on Save the Date and get the dates and information on these events. And as the registration and the agendas become available, we'll post those on the website too. On my website, we archive all of our newsletters, also our sold listings. So if you want to look at some sale comps, those are on the website. If you want us to email you the newsletter, or mail it to you, we'll be happy to do that. Just call or send us an email. And the best number to call is 319-378-6786. And those we'll be glad to mail it to you or email it to you. So those are the announcements for today. And I want to introduce Amy and let our listeners know a little bit about her. Amy's been with the Wisconsin Housing Alliance for quite a number of years. She was the assistant executive director for probably at least 10 years before she became the executive director. And she took over for Ross Kinsler, who retired, and Ross is famous throughout the industry for education for retailers and manufacturers and park owners during his tenure as the Wisconsin executive director. But Amy, when she came on board with the Wisconsin Housing Alliance, was new to the industry. And I want people to think about that for a moment, because there are some state associations where they have executive directors who are from the industry, maybe have been involved in some aspect of the park business or retail business, but Ross's philosophy was a smart person and a go-getter, and somebody who is very self-motivated. You can teach them what they need to learn. And Amy Bliss is one of the smartest people I know in this business, and is always a constant resource and really easy to reach. She gets back to people so quickly. to help them, answer their questions. And she's always thinking ahead and anticipating what's next. And that's different than a lot of associations when something really becomes a big problem. Then the members are going to the executive director to find out, well, what can we do about this? With Amy, she's right there with the members, listening, seeing what's happening, and trying to get in front of these legislative problems or just management problems or policy problems that all park owners have from time to time. And just one more thing I wanted to say about Amy is that the recommendations about her that I've received from the members of her association and her board members just speak very, very highly of her. So with that, I'll introduce Amy Bliss. Amy, are you with us?
I am. Thank you very much for the lovely introduction.
Well, I could have taken up the whole time just talking about you, but people want to hear from you, not from me. So, so Amy, tell us a little bit about your background, because I want, if there are any board members from other associations or executive directors that are listening to this, it's food for thought when you need to hire a new executive director. So Amy, tell us about your background.
Okay. I started with the manufactured housing industry back in 1991. So I've been here 26 years. In January, it'll be 27. So when I first started, I didn't really even know what an association was. I've quickly learned, and well, quickly, I guess 26 years is not that quick, but I think it helps to have a philosophy. My philosophy here is that we get what we want by helping others get what they want or need. And so we really, really try to be all about a membership focus. Whatever they need, we're going to try to get for them, which is unlike some other associations. We really are very hands-on with providing them the tools that they need to be successful. So, for example, we provide leases to our members. So instead of a member having to go to an attorney and have a lease drafted, or worse yet, go to Staples and get some kind of form letter that will not match Wisconsin law. We do that for them because we want to keep them out of trouble. There's nothing worse than seeing a member splashed across the news for, having illegal provisions in their lease or doing something that innocently they didn't know was wrong. Or having an eviction thrown out because they have an illegal provision in their lease. So we really try to keep our members knowledgeable on what the law is and also provide the tools that they need.
If I may, I'd just like to chime in on that. Not only do they make the lease available, but on the Wisconsin Housing Alliance website, and you can only access this if you're a member, but they have a feature where you can scroll through different topics. And if you have a question or need a form, you can just scroll through their list by, I think it's in alphabetical order, to find a form or just information on, parks in the state of Wisconsin. So I've not seen that on other state association websites.
Yeah, I know some states feel that it's opening themselves up to liability if something's wrong, but we do have it vetted by attorneys. We are in contact with our consumer protection department to make sure that they're okay with what we're doing. And we also have directors and officers liability insurance. So if something would go wrong, which we have never had it happen, then we would be protected as an organization. So, you know, if anyone is a member to another state association, I would highly recommend talking to your executive director or board members or both, and really push for what you need, because if you don't provide services to your members, they're not going to stay members for very long. And some of the education that we do, I think, is really what keeps our members very tight knit to our association.
I would agree with that. I think that your education, which you offer, the two boot camps a year and one annual meeting, and tell us about your boot camps and how that came about and what the topics that you cover.
Yeah, we have a basic boot camp, which last year we were expecting that mostly just new community managers would sign up for that, and we were hoping to get maybe 25 people. We ended up with 100 people in a really tight knit room, but we go through the very basics, starting with screening and best practices for screening tenants, and then we move into fair housing issues. Then we move into the actual lease itself, and we touch on things like evictions and, you know, going through that process. We talk about everything from, you know, sex offenders to pit bulls. Service animal topics seem to be extremely well talked about, because I know a lot of community owners are having issues. Everyone needing an emotional support pit bull. So we really get down to the basics, and it's kind of funny because some people come to it every year, even though it's we kind of designed it newer members, but they like it. And I try to have an attorney there to cover some of the topics. And then we also have community management seminars every year, which gets in more to the ownership side of the business. So we'll have, you know, just different people talking about, you know, return on investment. And I know we had a panel last year with Joanne and some appraisers talking about how to make your community, you know, the best it can be if you're in the area where you're thinking of selling, or even just trying to figure out the value of your community. So we have a lot of insightful people that give really practical business advice for community owners. We also have training seminars for our retailers. So we have a sales boot camp seminar as well. You know, everybody needs a refresh on the law once in a while, the forms that have to be used. So we do that as well. And sometimes if we do get new laws, we'll have new law seminars that are a little shorter that just cover the topic of what's new in the regulations, because that's ever changing. And we've been working very hard on legislation to make Wisconsin a more landlord-friendly environment. You know, we keep like rent control and
Sure. And you've done a great job on that. And I want to mention to our listeners that I have attended quite a number of the Wisconsin Housing Alliance educational events, and I think one could benefit even if one didn't have any property or didn't do business in the state of Wisconsin. They're really excellent, and you're absolutely right. We all need reminders on federal fair housing and the parts of the lease. And the danger, I think, in any business or industry is when you think you've heard it all and you've, you know, you think that there's nothing more to learn or to tweak about how you practice your business. I think that's when people can get into trouble and do get into trouble. So they're excellent refresher courses, even if you've been in the business for a long time. And I wanted, Amy has some thoughts about service animals that I want to get to in a moment. But before we do, Amy, you were involved in some significant legislation in the state of Wisconsin that was just signed into law by the governor of Wisconsin, and that has to do with parks and tenant-owned manufactured homes in the park. Can you tell us about the new legislation and how it came about and kind of the theory behind the legislation?
Yeah, I definitely will. So how this came about is we had a member in a small town in northern Wisconsin, and the municipality was literally trying to get rid of 4 manufacturing communities. And they were doing this by going into the community and citing them for violations of some sort, whether it was the handrails on the steps to exit the home or the deck, or skirting that wasn't perfect. And they were citing the manufactured home community owner versus the home owner. And in Wisconsin, you have to have a reason to evict someone. And there's no judge in the state that would evict someone because their handrail wasn't sufficient on their deck.
Sure, sure.
As a stick to beat up the community owner to try to, get them to close down and be gone. They were threatening their license. And so we had a law passed just recently, the bill signing was just last week, where the municipality has to send those notices to the owner of the home. Now that seems like it makes sense that we shouldn't have to have a law for that.
Right.
But when these municipalities get out of control like that, unfortunately, we do have to make laws. And this law just went into effect December 1st.
Okay.
And it's funny because just yesterday I got an email from the park owner. They're still doing it. They're completely going against the law. They were doing $125 fines and not really even telling them what the violation was.
Oh.
They just lot number 10, lot number 16. And so, we're obviously going to have to go to the municipality and educate them on the new laws. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we fight a lot of those battles, as I'm sure every other state association executive does. So that was one of our newer pieces of legislation. A couple years ago, we also did some legislation regarding non-conforming use regulations.
Okay.
When manufactured home communities were built, they were generally built on the outskirts of a municipality.
Sure.
And over time, zoning laws went into effect. So they were considered a non-conforming use in the state of Wisconsin in many instances.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be that if you upgraded your community by more than 50% of its value, you would lose that non-conforming use status and not be able to, replace homes or replace infrastructure if needed. So we had a law passed that said just because you upgrade or replace homes, that will not eliminate the non-conforming use structure of your zoning. And so that was a big win for us. We also got it approved that on private land, they could replace their homes as well. We had a retired Vietnam veteran who had a home that was destroyed by a weatherization bureau. What they did to it made it mold and the roof cave in. And the city of Appleton would not let him replace his single section home with another single section home. And so I was working on this non-conforming use legislation, and one of the senators said, why don't we make that the same for private land. And I'm like, yeah, why don't we? Because he knew the scenario, and it had been kind of widely publicized because he didn't have very much money. And, so anyway, it was too late for him, but enough agencies came together and built him a home that did fit the zoning, which was unfortunate because now he's saddled as a single man with a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home he needs for, to heat and all that other stuff. But he was able to testify for our bill, and we got it through for the next person that might be in that scenario.
Well, that's quite an accomplishment, and that's a much needed legislation, and educating the legislatures of what is happening, why that's needed. That's always a good thing. We can't assume that people know what the situation is. And Amy, in Wisconsin, does the state law, does that supersede the city or township law?
For building codes, it does. In Wisconsin, what's called the Uniform Dwelling Code, and that uniform means it's supposed to be consistent throughout the state. The only thing that our state building code has jurisdiction over is installation of homes.
Okay.
Things like attachments, decks, if you're going to build an on-site garage, the steps, exit the home, that type of thing. So, obviously the home is built to the HUD code in the factory, but yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. Now, municipalities sometimes, when their town boards get elected or whatever, they all of a sudden think they're king and can kind of make up their own rules.
Right.
But we spend a lot of time beating those down.
Yes. Yeah, what's always fun to see is what ends up in the newspaper, on TV, is some council person or supervisor or elected official who is airing his opinion, in the media about what he thinks about trailers or mobile homes and trailer courts and so on. And, it just sort of signifies what they don't know about what a great housing option communities and manufactured and mobile homes are for their constituents. And so, Amy, tell us a little bit, if you would, just maybe 3 key things you did to get this. A lot of park owners can relate to what you say about they're having a hard time with their local city or township or county. What were some of, maybe the 3 or 4 key things that you did to get the ball rolling on this legislation?
Well, first of all, we are a pretty data-driven organization, and so we keep information in our membership database as to what Senate and Assembly district our members are in, and then we can segment that to say, okay, you have X number of communities in your legislative district, and within that community, there's probably, however many families based on the number of sites.
Sure.
And so we extrapolate that data, and this last piece of legislation, I made sure I went to the person who had the most manufactured home sites in their district, and she didn't know it. That information was like golden to her, because, first of all, I was able to show that she's got, maybe 1,000+ families living in her, live in manufactured homes, just in communities. And then when she started going through the list, she was recognizing some names. Oh yeah, this person, I know this person. And she didn't really know that they owned the manufactured home community. And so we kind of highlight the really nice ones in their district. And, a lot of times we'll have members call and say, yeah, this is an issue. And she was proactive in calling them.
Oh,
And
wow.
nice to have, I'm a lobbyist and I can get the ball rolling. I can do the technical things, but boy, those contacts from our members that actually live and work in those, that is a golden piece of communication. And I would like to say, if anybody's listening that thinks they're nervous about calling, one of their elected officials, don't ever hesitate to do that because it means a lot. If you have an issue that's important to you, that's affecting your business, especially if you're a small business, that is just a golden communication, and they love to hear from you. And you don't necessarily have to talk to the senator or the assembly rep. Their staff people, if you get to the right one, they are just as important to communicate with. And it can be something as quick as an email.
Yes.
They get listened to, they really do. In fact, we don't really ever have our members write letters. We have them send them via email or fax, which I know is old school, but sometimes, especially at the federal level, it would take weeks, if not months, to get a letter to an elected official because they have to go through all this anthrax screening. So we don't recommend actually sending a physical letter unless you have like a PDF of it and then you email it to them.
Sure. I think that's good advice that the legislature, a good legislator, they will be happy to hear from their constituents, even if you're of a different party, or even if you didn't write a check to contribute to their campaign. And if they don't, that's probably a sign of not a very not the best legislature, because they all do have staffs and they do want to know what's on your mind and what's happening out there. And I think that's very good advice. And so as a community owner or a retailer, we have to get involved. We can't just sit back and just tell our executive director to, well, get out there and fix this. You know all these people.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing we do is when we have a champion of some of our legislation, we invite that legislator to come to our convention and we give them a Friend of the Industry award. It's just like a little crystal house shaped award with their name on it that says, Friend of the Industry and, what year or whatever. And that means a lot to them. And in fact, this last time, she wanted everybody to come out in the hallway and take a picture with her. And about 25% of the meeting emptied out to go because that's how many she had in her district. So it was very nice.
Yes, and so those are excellent points, and we're getting towards the end of our call, and so let's. I want to switch over to the elephant in the room, or talking about service animals. Hopefully, we're not going to have elephants living in our communities, but
I wouldn't doubt.
You've kind of seen. You probably. I'm sure you wouldn't doubt it, Amy. I'm sure you've seen it all. And so I know you have some thoughts about this service animal, and it seems like when I talk to park owners, it's not very long into the conversation that the service animal laws don't come up. And there's so tell us your thoughts on, with any legislation, it seems like there's a responsibility. So there's responsibilities for the park owners under this new legislation, but there don't seem to be too many much responsibility for the tenant living in these communities. So what are some of your thoughts about these service animals?
Well, it's just gotten out of control with the need for comfort animals. And unfortunately, a couple years ago, HUD had a memorandum that said you couldn't discriminate based on the breed of the animal. A lot of times park owners will allow dogs or cats, but they don't want pit bulls and Rottweilers and dangerous breed dogs. And so HUD came out with a memo saying that you couldn't discriminate just based on the fact that it was a pit bull unless that particular pit bull has been known to be dangerous. Well, that's a pretty hard thing to know.
Sure.
Someone either moving into the park or just getting the dog. So it's become really out of control. I actually had a member who a doctor wrote a letter saying that the child needed a pet alligator for his ADHD.
Oh my gosh.
So there's not much doctors willing to write those letters. We've had kangaroos, we've had goats. Someone wanted a pet goat because they said they had sleep apnea and the goat would nudge them so that they woke up and would start breathing again, where the reasonable accommodation would have been a CPAP machine. Anyway, I could go on. I've got stories all day long, but what we're trying to do here in Wisconsin, and I testified before the Senate yesterday, we've got a bill in the works that says that they must get a note from a licensed professional in Wisconsin, because what some of these people are doing, you can go on the internet and do a 2-second search and find a certificate that someone out there in the World Wide Web will give you, saying that you need this service animal, whatever it is.
Sure.
And so we're also making it illegal and fine for falsifying the need for a service animal. So if the person falsifies it, or if their medical professional falsifies it, there'd be a $500 minimum fine. Now, that might make the medical professional have a little pause when you send them a request for verification, and it has, by state statute, it is illegal to falsify the need for a, companion animal or service animal. And we're hoping that that might make the medical profession just step back a little bit and say, is this really a need for a disability, or is this just a want? So we're hoping that that will stop some of the abuse in this scenario.
Yes, it seems like it has, like you say, it has become out of control. And what doesn't happen on a practical matter is that the health professional that writes that letter doesn't really understand how that plays out as a practical matter in operating a community, and also for the safety of anybody else living in the community.
We had one community owner who allowed a companion animal, which it was a pit bull, and it mangled the face of one of the other, a 2-year-old girl. And tell that park owner, if someone else asks, they have to accept that there's something wrong with that. And this really needs to be fixed on a federal level. I have written letters to Ben Carson about this, who's in
okay.
I received no response.
I'm shocked.
Doesn't mean that I'm not going to keep trying, but some of this has just gone way beyond fair housing.
It has.
Nobody would deny someone who truly needed a service animal.
Yes.
But some of this, why wouldn't a little 20-pound dog serve as a companion animal? Why do you need a dangerous breed dog?
Yes, that seems to be the conundrum. Is most owners would go along with the service animal part of it. I think when people have a problem is the quantity and the danger of certain breeds. And Amy, do you have any thoughts on what about insurance? I've heard some park owners say, well, I won't take, certain breeds, whether it's a service animal or not, because my insurance company will cancel my policy, or the rates will go up so much with this breed of pet, or I'm sorry, not pet, service animal living on the property, that it's a hardship for the park owner.
Well, that, you can claim a hardship. However, you are obligated to look at other insurance policies. Just because your insurance company says no does not mean that you don't have to try to mitigate that hardship by looking elsewhere for insurance.
I see.
Yeah, they've come out with guidance on that, and that's also pretty unfortunate, especially if you've had a long-term relationship with your insurance company. I do not know of many insurance companies who really do deny based on, deny your coverage based on having animals in the park. We have a really good insurance program for our members, and I have asked them if they have any breed restrictions or increased fees because you allow them, and they do not. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So that's perhaps could be a smoke screen
Yes.
Okay, so it probably is not going to fly if someone actually, if a tenant decides to go to an agent, local, or to a higher authority, to
Right.
an agency and complain.
And the problem with this whole scenario is that it costs a lot of money to defend yourself, even if you're in the right, even if
Yes.
there's a line, you have to defend yourself, and it's not cheap.
It's not cheap, and you can't retaliate. I mean, there's just so many things around that. You're absolutely right. And so, so the best thing would be to follow the policies, and until there's some other rulings that go along with that.
Yeah.
That might give a park owner some relief.
And hopefully, if everybody talks more to MHI about on this issue, that would be very helpful, because that's the one thing that I think community owners need at the national level.
Yes, they need to hear the stories from out here on the ground of how these things are really playing out, and they need us to tell them what the problems are, and propose solutions to this issue. So I think we're just probably on the tip of the iceberg of how this service animal, comfort animal is going to play out, where people ought to be able to have a comfort animal, but just not to abuse the federal regulations on that.
Right.
So I want to thank Amy Bliss for being our guest today. I think this was a tremendous show and very good insight on what associations can do to educate their members, their legislators, and the public. And if anybody wants to see a model of how to do it extremely well and get results that are fair for park owners, I recommend they look to the Wisconsin Housing Alliance of how to model their legislative efforts and their education as well. So thank you, Amy. And next week, our guest is Ken Corbin, and Ken is a national housing consultant. He's been tremendously successful in selling manufactured homes, and he's now a national consultant. So we're going to learn some good ideas on best practices for selling homes. So thanks, everyone. See you next week.